and Rohan will answer.
Hello and welcome to House of R. I'm Joanna Robinson. That was the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings film you just heard, but we are talking about Rings of Power. I'll explain myself in a second. Joining me today to answer some of your pressing questions about Rings of Power Season 2, Episodes 1 through 3, or other things Rings of Power related, it is Mallory Rubin. Hi, Mallory. How you doing?
Joe, you tell old Maldrick everything you know about Sauron. It's mailbag time.
It's mailbag time. Wow, Maldrick. We'll see if that sticks for you. We're mailbagging today.
I hope not. Frankly,
and
I hope
why
not.
did we start with the beacons being lit? There isn't a ton of mail-related stuff. All we have is the High King sending a message that did not get where it needed to go, in the Rings of Power. So I couldn't find a ton of mail. No one's sending ravens. Ravens would solve a lot of problems in Middle-earth is all I have to say. So, think about it.
Yeah.
Invest.
What if you could just text Celebrimbor right now?
BTW. That hot guy.
Heads up.
It's the Dark Lord. Sorry to tell you this. You are entertaining the Dark Lord. Okay. What are we here today to do? We're here to answer your questions that you might have sent to hobbitsanddragons@gmail.com. That's what we're doing. Elsewhere in the Ringerverse, the Midnight Boys, pew pew, I believe, are also mailbagging today.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that's the case, or this week, as it were. Star Wars Outlaws First Impressions from Button Mash Team. Terminator Zero coverage from the Mint Edition, where, as I mentioned last week, Timothy Olyphant is voicing a Terminator. I've heard it's really good. I haven't checked it out yet, but I've been hearing from people that it's like one of the better. I mean, the bar is low on the Terminator franchise sometimes, but apparently this is like a really good timey-wimey story. And you and I love
a timey-wimey story.
A timey-wimey story.
Love.
As for us, we'll be back at the end of the week, of course, covering episode 4 of Rings of Power. We're in a real Rings space for a couple weeks here, and then, Agatha's showing up. There's gonna be witch stuff. There's gonna be all kinds of stuff. But we are we get to really dedicate ourselves to Rings for a couple weeks, which is fun. How are you feeling about it, Mallory?
Thrilled. I plan to go right from talking about Rings of Power with you to talking about the Orioles claiming their World Series ring into talking about the Ravens claiming their Super Bowl ring. So it's rings all the time for me. Rings o'clock.
Rings o'clock. How are the Orioles doing? Should we talk about that?
Well, they're hanging on.
Okay.
The injury curse. It's like the blight on the great tree, the injuries. So I just we need a little of that mithril to come into play here.
Mithril for the Orioles.
For the final push. Get healthy for the playoffs, and then who knows? Anything can happen in October.
Well, if you've got a diplomat like Elrond to send to the dwarves, we'll see if we can make that happen. Okay. Oh, Rubin, that's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Star Wars, Terminator, Rings of Power, all this kind of stuff. How can folks keep track of everything that's happening?
Thanks for asking. Here's the rundown. 1, follow the pods. Follow House of R. Follow the Ringerverse on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Then follow the Ringerverse YouTube channel, because full video episodes of House of R and Midnight Boys are available for you on both Spotify and the Ringerverse YouTube channel. While you're at it, follow the Ringerverse on the social media platform of your choosing. We are on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and then Joe already mentioned the inbox. This is a mailbag episode, so the inbox is open. Send us your emails. Send us your thoughts on this Rings of Power season. Send us your thoughts on Agatha, Penguin, Kraven the Hunter, Venom,
Beetlejuice, whatever's going on. Yeah.
Everything.
Love it. Okay. Also, a slight other promo, I guess, while I'm here. We did not cover Alien Romulus, and you haven't seen it yet, right? I know you've seen every other Alien movie. Okay. Trial by Content is covering Alien Romulus and the art or curse of digital resurrection. over on Trial by Content. So I've had some people asking me for my Alien Romulus take. I don't know why they want that from me, but if you do, Trial by Content is where you will find that this week. Okay.
Wonderful.
It's not quite Disa and Doran, but our listeners, Dina and Donnie, are celebrating an 8th anniversary, and Donnie asked if we could just shout out Dina on their anniversary. So happy anniversary to Dina and Donnie.
Dina.
Yeah.
Happy anniversary, Donnie.
Yeah, exactly. They had this like really sick inflatable dragon thing at their anniversary party. Very cool. Very House of
Like
Hardcore.
a bouncy castle? Like
It was like an inflatable dragon that you could like
raft?
pose with.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. Right?
Why don't we have one of those?
I know. Why isn't it in the background right now is my question. Okay. And then just a fun fact I forgot to mention on Friday, but I think it's fun. Benjamin Walker, who is playing High King Gil-galad, also is doing the voice for Damrod the Hill Troll. And I hope similar to the video footage we got of Benedict Cumberbatch crawling around the floor as Smaug, I can't wait to see Ben Walker just really going for it in the sound booth playing the Hill Troll. So
what do you think was more exciting, getting to sing a beautiful like dirge or getting to play a hill troll?
I mean, singing in Quenya is always pretty exciting, but I don't know. I think
1A, 1B.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a tie. It's a real tie. Okay, spoiler warning today. This is not really. We are mainly keeping this to like season 2, episodes 1 through 3. Again, our spoiler warnings on Rings of Power are kind of complicated. We'll get into it like fully on the episode 4 breakdown, sort of what we plan to talk about. As Mal mentioned last Friday, we're not going to pretend that you haven't seen the Lord of the Rings trilogy by Peter Jackson, or you are not aware of the basic plot points of those films. But there's some stuff that happens between this show and that is in the text that we won't get too much into until I think our last question, maybe 2 of the questions we have today, and we will give you warning when we get there. Does that sound right and fair and just, Mallory Rubin?
I think so. This is always a tougher one, but yeah, if we're gonna get into some future things, we'll note it, and if they feel like things that you probably already know about, then safe waters, warm waters. Come on in, move your hand around, watch the fish jump, and
pull the fish out of the water in a somewhat
Yeah.
creepy way. Kieran, always with us. Okay. Based on a dumb Slack joke I made when we said we were doing a mailbag
I didn't think
episode.
it was dumb. I thought it was brilliant. Genuinely.
This is the audio that's taking us into our mailbag.
Shut up! Baggins! Shut. Baggins.
It's a Shire Mailbaggins. That's what we're doing
Shire
today.
Mailbaggins, coined by you.
Here we are in Slack.
Genius
encouraged by
among
you.
us. That was piercing in the eardrum. I gotta say.
That came in quite hot.
Steve is a gem and does a lot of pre-record audio calibrations with us because he's always thinking of our well-being, and rarely are we surprised then once we sit down to record. But that one took my breath away.
As the Nazgul are wont to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fitting.
So we're starting sort of with like a basic. We've talked about this a few other times before, but just in case there are new folks joining us, we thought we'd start with this question from Sarah. Sarah, who thanked us for many, many podcasts. Yeah.
I mean, it's a mailbag. We know the call's coming, and yet we're surprised.
Came in hot. Okay. Sarah, who thanked us for hours and hours of podcasts, because we hear a lot from new moms who are like up all hours of the night, and they're up with their kids and new dads too. And they're like, thanks for the gajillion hours of podcasting helping me through that. So anyway, Sarah, who just had a baby, was asking us, when did these stories, meaning Tolkien, come into your lives? When would be an appropriate time to read the text with like her daughter, Sarah's daughter? And do they make kid-friendly, thinking picture book versions that Tolkien fans endorse? Mallory Rubin, what do you want to say?
Okay, why don't we start with our respective origins, and then we can hit the next part of that. Yeah, it's nice to chat about this again for anyone who's new to the Rings party. I love Lord of the Rings. I've loved Lord of the Rings for a long time, and my dad was a massive Tolkien fan, massive. So it's like one of his favorite stories ever, something that he was always fond of and talking about. when I was a kid, my parents were divorced. So at my dad's house, there's this like little bookshelf in my room that my dad built, and he filled with books, and like never, no pressure, no nothing. They were just there for me, like waiting to be discovered when I wanted to discover them. And The Hobbit was one of those books. I was in elementary school, a very slowly developing reader. And I was in fourth grade, starting fifth grade, like a lower reading group. And when I got bumped up to the higher reading group, The Hobbit was the first book that I read as part of that reading group. And so like, not only do I love the story and I love the world, but I have this like really keen and strong and powerful association with it as like when I started to build confidence as a reader, and like on my own feel like more emboldened to spend time with the printed page and reading and like learning and discovering. So that was really like meaningful and wonderful. That was fifth grade. And then we read Fellowship in middle school, and I was so riveted by it. I couldn't put it down. I like got in trouble one day at Hebrew school because I was reading it under my desk because I didn't want to put it away. And that's like the early days with the books. The movies came out.
How old would you say you were?
So that was like Hobbit was when I was 10. And then when I read Fellowship, it must have been seventh grade reading. So yeah, that would have been when I was 12. And I don't recall us reading the other two books in the trilogy as part of like our middle school reading curriculum, only Fellowship, which is a little odd. So then I would have read those for the first time on my own after that. The movies, the Peter Jackson films came out when I was in high school. Obviously, they came out, as we all remember fondly, just like fucking clockwork, December after December, 3 years in a row. They don't do it like that anymore, folks. They don't do it like that anymore. What a time that was. And I went to see each of those movies with my dad and my stepmom at the theater. It was incredible. I have this really fond memory of we went back to my dad's house after my stepmom was like super worried about Sam, who among us, right? And I just remember us standing around like the little island in the kitchen and my dad saying, "Oh, honey, there's more in store for Samwise Gamgee." And it was just like a thing the family loved to share.
That's so sweet.
Now every holiday season, used to be Thanksgiving. The last couple of years, it ended up being like the Christmas New Year window. Adam and I watched.
An influencer.
Yeah, it could be my inclination was just because of like limited holiday free time and scheduling, but I think it's probably the Joanna Robinson effect. If I stare at all the facts and all the variables, Adam and I watch the extended editions every year. It's like our favorite annual tradition. So it's just one of the worlds I love most, and it's the first story I remember really like falling in love with, the first world and fictional universe that I couldn't wait to go back to and revisit and think about and spend time in and share with people I loved. So it's a very special story to me. It's one of the joys of my life to get to visit Middle-earth with you. Joanna, please tell us about your Tolkien origin story.
My origin starts a little later. I was not a Tolkien reader when I was younger. We read like C.S. Lewis, definitely. My sister might have read Tolkien, but I was not reading Tolkien. When I got to college, my freshman year of college, my boyfriend freshman year had like this Lord of the Rings poster on his ceiling, which like of the books, because the movies weren't out yet, of like all the different like characters. And so he was like really into it and like wanted to share it with me. And so then I like went to like walked over to the borders of Barnes and Noble or whatever and like bought my first of now many box sets of Lord of the Rings that I have. And I read the books, and that was like, and then the movies started coming out like one after another. I would watch them. I would go home for Christmas every year and watch them with like my high school friends. We would come home for Christmas and we'd line up at this one theater and stand in line. And I remember for Return of the King, it was raining. So the whole theater, we stood in line for a really long time. The whole theater, this is a massive, massive theater in Marin County that's now closed. But like the whole theater was just full of like people who were just like steaming, like because the theater was super warm and we were all cold and like wet from the rain. So all of our jeans were like, yeah, it was like, that's how we all sat through Return of the King. Worth it. Wonderful.
Oh my goodness.
I do remember, similar to your story about Sam, I remember I went to go see Fellowship with my family, like, one of the, like, because I saw it multiple times in theaters, obviously. And I remember we were out to sushi with my mom, my dad, my sister, and my mom was like, "Okay, just tell me, is Gandalf really dead?" And I was just like, we were like, do you want us to tell you? Stay tuned to find out.
Yeah.
Like, do you want to know? It's like one of my early interactions with someone being like,
man.
explain, someone who has read the books, what happens to, et cetera. Anyway, and then, I just loved those films so much. I loved the books so much. And then I started rereading them, and then rewatching the films every year at Christmas, the extended editions. And that is also one of my favorite holiday traditions. It's funny, my nephew, so I don't know, like, sort of like how old was I when I started reading, I don't have that data. But sort of trying to calibrate your ages with my nephew who's 13 had previously tried Lord of the Rings and didn't like get into it, but tried again now. And he's a big reader, really, really big reader, but read it now and really liked it. So, or I don't know about really likes it, but is liking it a lot. And so I would say around there, like 12, 13, because the Hobbit's for younger ages, right?
You could definitely do the Hobbit earlier, for sure.
And then like I would say 12, 13, something like that, depending on your reading level and your interests or whatever. It's for Lord of the Rings. As for like stuff that's kid friendly, I would heartily recommend the Bakshi animated Lord of the Rings as an early entry point, 1978 animated Lord of the Rings. Very fascinating artifact, but like kind of just a really gentle way to get into the world. Any suggestions from you, Mallory, Rubin?
Beyond that, which I also agree is worth checking out. Not really. I have in general, I think, a difficult time gauging the right age to read something. I'm always fascinated now. Like my friends who have kids, I am so interested in when they choose to introduce their kids to Harry, because it's pretty consistently a lot younger than I would have guessed, just based on the emotional trauma that awaits. But I'd have no feel for that, and I think like obviously some of that is what your particular child seems ready for and inclined toward. In terms of like illustrated editions, there are a number of different illustrated editions of the text, but it's different than like I think the spirit of the prompt, like picture books.
Yeah, like because I mean I definitely had versions of like, I have a book somewhere on my shelf that's like classics to read aloud to your children, which like my dad would like read like kid versions of like Romeo and Juliet and like whatever else to us that, in language that we could understand, but we would understand like the basic plot of.
Yeah.
So I don't have any editions.
One
of
thing I
those
think is nice is like, there are a number of different illustrated editions over the years. There are like the Alan Lee illustrated editions. Just the last few years, they came out with those newer illustrated editions. Now they're like tomes, so I don't know that like a 11-year-old is going to sit there with that open on their lap, but they actually have Tolkien's illustrations in them. And I think it is really like one of the things I really loved when I was younger was to look at the maps. We've talked about this before, but you get obviously like a bearing and a sense of place and the relative like proximity of these locations. But it's just like you see these sketches and these illustrations of what the world is supposed to look like, and it really like sparks and animates your curiosity further. So even if that's not necessarily something that you're going to sit down and thumb through every single page of on the first go, I think it would be fun to look through those. I don't know.
And I mean, like The Hobbit, again, The Lord of the Rings is sort of dense linguistically and pretty scary in points. The Hobbit films are kind of scary in points in ways I don't think they need to be, but like The Hobbit as a book might be like a fun read aloud. It started with Tolkien telling his children bedtime stories. Is sort of like how this world developed in the first place. So,
How about an audiobook for the whole family?
Oh yeah, Andy Serkis audiobooks are really, really delightful. Good. Very, very good. I was just re-listening to his Tom Bombadil, actually the In the House of Tom Bombadil chapter of Fellowship, and I was just like, he's really going. Andy Serkis is really going for it, because Tom Bombadil sings for like 75% of that chapter. So Andy Serkis is like, okay, here we go.
Great stuff.
Yeah. So I we're always excited to hear people announce new generations of kids getting into these stories is really, really fun. I will say one other thing. I think getting into Tolkien in college And I took a fantasy literature class and a children's literature class where Tolkien came up in both of those. And then I took a history of the English language class where he came up. My professor in that class loved to bring up Tolkien. And so I think that's where like connecting Tolkien with like scholarship, I think really came in really early for me. But certainly you don't have to take an academic approach. You can just sort of like enjoy the wild adventure of it, because that is all waiting for you in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and The Silmarillion, once you get into it. So
we build toward that.
we'll get there. Okay. Next question comes from Andrea. It was like less of a question and more of a point, but I tacked a question onto it in order to smuggle it into the mailbag, the mailbaggins. So here we are. Andrea wrote, of possession and yearning, according to the philosophy of Tolkien by Peter Kreeft. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. In Tolkien's work, there are two longings: Sehnsucht, or the mysterious longing for we know not what, as the stranger so perfectly encapsulates when he says to Nori, a glimmer, a longing, a feeling I can't remember or even name, just beyond the sunset. It immediately evokes Valinor, but also something that we as humans seek. It is reflected in Círdan's longing of Valinor while he looks across the bay into the sunset. Beautiful images, no need for dialogue as we sense that longing. Of Aragorn, the Peter Jackson movie scene, passing next to the Argonath. The past, the glory of kings. Wow. You have to. I feel like you have
Fantastic.
to say Argonath. The past, the glory of kings of old. This yearning is not physical. It is always out of reach, like death, what lies beyond the sea. The second longing is that of possession, not power of the flesh, but over flesh, just as Sauron became the ring and Gollum lost his sense of self to the ring. Once we yearn for something to possess, it ends up possessing us in turn. We are now undone by that which we covet. So my question to you, Mallory, and the way I'm justifying putting this in mailbag, where else should we be on the lookout for this theme across like the set of characters we have in the Rings of Power season 2? You want to go first?
Yeah. I kind of want you to just read the beautiful email again. That was just delightful to listen to. Yeah. So I would say pretty much everywhere. Like this is an idea. We'll go through some of the regions and character sets here for some top contenders, but this is an idea we talk about a lot, not only in Lord of the Rings stories, but fantasy stories more broadly. Yeah. Would you say that Anakin is on your mind reading this question, listening to this question? It's like impossible not to think of this across our wider storytelling tapestry here. So I think something we like to do is look for not only like the when and the where, but where the nobler former can perhaps be at risk of morphing into the latter.
Yeah.
And then if the latter, when present, ever had origins in the former and like what we can learn from that. So that's always something to keep in mind. We have some iconic moments, of course, from the text and the films where this very threat is top of mind for characters who we or other characters in the story trust. Like, I don't know, let's just return to Frodo offering a couple people the ring for a second and seeing how they respond. And then that's a good table setter for examining some of the season 2 consideration sets. Sam and Galadriel. Let's talk about Sam. Can't go more than 4 minutes on a pod without talking about Sam. It's not going to happen today. It'll never happen. The best. Fellowship. I wish you'd taken his ring, Sam said. You'd put things to rights. You'd stop them digging up the gaffer and turning him adrift. You'd make some folk pay for their dirty work. I would, she said. That is how it would begin, but it would not stop with that. So this is always the risk, right? How did Gandalf respond to Frodo tempting him? What does that temptation represent? The way that power can perhaps tip the scales, not only of an outcome, but of your own morality. Do not tempt me. I dare not take it. Not even to keep it safe. Okay, so this is like elemental to how we think about the choices characters make in the world. Want to just like, much like, we won't go through every character. Obviously, we don't have time for that, but kind of in like lightning round style, much like we did for our top moments refresher. Let's go like by character set. So let's start with the Harfoots and the Stranger. I would say that Nori is like as firmly rooted in that former camp as like any character in the story. If we're breaking it into the two buckets in the question there. This is like our origin with Nori.
Have you ever
right?
wondered what's outside? Yeah.
Haven't you ever wondered what else is out there? Or even like after discovering the stranger in his little meteor fire pit, it's like there's a reason this happened. Like I was supposed to find him. There are other characters where if we would hear that kind of like, I am centered with great meaning and glory and purpose, we'd be worried, but that's not how we feel with Nori because we understand from the beginning that Nori is looking for a sense of the world, right?
Have a little working theory. I'm going to wait until we get through all not power sets, all the regional and sets of characters. But I think the Rings of Power is offering up a thesis on this, and I would love to float that by you. Okay, go for it.
Fantastic. Thrilled. Okay, obviously Poppy. We've talked about Wandering Day as much as we've talked about maybe anything in the story so far. I trade all I've known for the unknown ahead. What could better sum up that sense of spirit and yearning? The stranger, that's the example in the question. In that beautiful, like, adventures they must be shared moment in the finale that we love to talk about so much, the setup from the stranger for that idea was betimes our paths are laid before us by powers greater than our own. In those moments, it's our task to make our feet go where our hearts wish not to tread. So there's like a healthy trepidation there, like accounting for the fear, the risk of the unknown, and then the spirit of adventure that's entwined with that. I feel like those characters, we are in like a relatively comfortable place. What are your thoughts on the Harfoots?
Yes,
Poppy,
Nori. I think part of this question, like sort of baked into this question that we're considering, and this is separate from my working theory, is this idea of like how vulnerable is this character to corruption or temptation or seduction, right? So if they're firmly rooted in that sort of pure idea of longing, then perhaps they're less vulnerable to that seduction of Sauron or what any kind of ring might offer them. So yeah, I would say my question around the stranger, and I don't know how much of this is sort of baked into them trying to constantly make us worried that he is some sort of malignant force of some kind, but his lack of control over his power, if that makes him vulnerable to something. Do you know what I mean? Because he's very concerned about that, you know?
Yeah.
But in terms of that longing, I would agree we're in the safe space.
Yeah, the control thing, the control call, I think is a great one. And also just like, again, to go to that Gandalf comp, either because a fellow wizard or because he's literally Gandalf, we'll circle back to that the wish to wield it would be too great for my strength. I shall have such need of it. Great perils lie before me. Like, how would you as a character and figure of great ability and consequence justify the use of something potentially nefarious? So that's obviously a different thing than the Harfoots. No one has yet said of the Harfoots anything quite like Celebrimbor saying men are covetous. So different. Numenor, I have a lot of concerns when we go to our Numenor characters. I have a lot of concerns.
Because that idea of like Valinor or like, the ideal of elven purity or whatever is something that the at least many of the humans on Numenor feel so resentful of and covetous of the immortality that the elves experience. And
for that reason, I'm like least worried right now about Elendil, Miriel, anyone we would firmly group under Elfriend under the faithful, right?
Yeah. Yes.
I would say then we have kind of like three clusters in Numenor. We have that cluster, then we have the like, we're walking on a line and it could tip. I would put Isildur there. And then we have the Farazan, Kemen, Earian camp where
you forgot Belzegar, my new favorite character.
I know you have him coming in the outline later. Bells. Farazan, I think, is emblematic of the type of figure we should be worried about because, like, I know we're talking about what should we be worried about for season 2, and we certainly got that like It will show the people you are a new kind of ruler for a new day. Speech about the bolts of fabric with Muriel. But if we look back to like, I think the really emblematic moment, other than, walking toward the eagle to steal an omen, would be that conversation with Kemen in the 5th episode last season when Kemen was challenging his father, why aren't you trying to stop this? And Farazan basically said, like, when all this is ended, elves will take orders from us. And then outlined how all of these things that other characters are thinking about as the consequential unfoldings for the future of like life itself. It's like, ores, forests, trade, tribute. I wouldn't dare stop that. Like, look at all the ways this can help us. It's about his ambition and his agendas and his potential gain. So that's very second bucket possession, seeking to gain in order to benefit directly.
That idea of control, I think.
Yeah.
And then control as it's related to fear. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of why I think like Isildur's in that middle tier in the Numenor set, because, when we heard him say to Estrid in the 3rd episode this season, ever since I felt bound to try to do something singular, something special, I think our hearts were like wrenching. It was such a moving moment, but it, like we talked about on the deep dive, it made me afraid too. Yeah. It's like, if you're in that kind of headspace, what do you justify to yourself
100%
in order to prove worthy of that legacy?
Internal pressure. And it reminds me a lot of Boromir, who was our quintessential, like, guy we're rooting for, but is the most vulnerable of all the fellowship to the call of the ring. And it's because of this internal, pressure that he puts on himself, or external pressure from his terrible father to protect Gondor. So when we hear, as we talked about in the last episodes, when we hear Boromir talk about, the white towers of Ithilien, right? And silver trumpets calling you home. Like, that feels that kind of like, you're talking about the pure longing sliding into the more impure longing. That does feel like that sort of beautiful, pure, Círdan sitting on the shore thinking about the light of Valinor kind of longing. But then it twists and it turns, and he knows immediately, like he knows he fell immediately. Yeah. And
the shame consumes him.
Oh, so important to me. Okay.
Love Boromir. It's a gift. Elves. Let's talk about some of the elves.
Yeah.
To that point of like fear and need and seeking to like preserve or protect.
Make Linden great again?
I mean, perfect transition. Yeah. So many of our elvish characters want to do good. They have a noble reason or pursuit, but the question then, and the one that Elrond is voicing, is can that maybe blind them to the risks, either the risks for them collectively or the risk of what they individually might be vulnerable to. We just go back to like, again, our origin with Galadriel, like that conversation that you picked as one of your favorite moments in our season 1 moments rundown. That first episode of season 1, that conversation between Galadriel and Elrond, the put up your sword conversation, like what was Galadriel voicing? The first bucket there is on offer. Sail into Valinor.
Mm-hmm.
Allow yourself to receive that. And she said, you would leave them alive in me, right? She is thinking about the inability to finish the quest, satisfy the quest, live up to her promise to herself, to her brother. And when she said to Gil-galad in the 2nd episode of this season, yes, he knows my mind and I know his, which is why I must face him, why I alone can slay him. We are alarmed because we can think of Galadriel as a character who has the capacity to be driven by good and achieve good, but who we know is susceptible to the need to dominate, to control, to win, to prove to herself and to others that
My girl is so messy. She's been messy all season 1, and the messiness abates. It continues. Does not abate. It continues. Yeah. Okay.
Boy, does it. Speaking of characters we are concerned about, let's speak briefly of Celebrimbor.
Yeah.
Is there a more susceptible character?
No.
I mean, he literally says out loud in episode 3 to Anatar, I would grant us a space to complete our work. I have spent an age preparing for this. I have apprenticed, I have studied, I have reached the very height of my craft. This is my moment. No, he will not take it away. We're like half a heartbeat from just croning my precious at that point. Yeah, like, what about Elrond, Joe? Where do you see Elrond?
Elrond fits into my larger theory, so
okay, so we'll put a pin in him for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. The dwarves. We are co-presidents of the Durin Disa fan club. We love them. We adore them. We love spending time with them. We said last pod that the episodes are just flat out better when they're in them than when they're not. We would be remiss in our duties as answerers of this question if we did not return to the penultimate episode of season 1, where Disa said, one day this will be your kingdom. Durin the Fourth's, not your brothers, not some other dwarf lords, yours and mine. Together we will rule this mountain, and all others before our time is done. That mithril belongs to us, to you, and me. And together, one day, we are going to dig.
Right. So that would be the kind of possession we're concerned about. Immediate red flags for us. And then also, as we mentioned in the last episode, this fear that Disa expresses over the first 3 episodes of not being able to hear the rocks, right? So like resonating with the rocks, connection to the earth and to the mountain is like in her very core, her very identity. And so that disconnect has left her exposed, I think, to other kinds of connections that might come her way. But the dwarf we're most worried about is Papa Doran, right? Like this is
Papa D.
This is our main concern, I would say.
And it's fascinating because, like, so we had Durin the Younger remind us of Papa Durin's warning, right? He said in episode 3 this season, this power in Eregion, I don't trust it. You told me once the fate of elves is decided by wiser minds than our own, that to try and alter it, to try and cheat death might lead to an even greater catastrophe. I keep wondering, what if you were right? And like we talked about
to Papa Durin at Eregion being like, here's some mithril. Let's make some rings.
Again, it's worrying. So we talked at the time about how it was like, there was this fascinating tension, which is very compelling for us as viewers, where like, Papa Durin saying, no, we will not help the elves was horrible. It was foul. And yet the fact that he was able to exhibit a note of like caution about what it would mean to keep delving and digging and seeking these riches and these pathways to greater achievements was like not something that we were seeing from the characters who maybe had a more open heart for other people. And like the fact that those two things were fractured in the character set, very interesting. So yeah, Papa Durin, we are worried as always, worried in general about everything happening in Khazad Dûm, full of characters who we love, and we are worried. I don't think we need to talk about Sauron. I think we know where he falls on this one. I see no difference. Oh. Okay. Yeah, so he's an interesting one because I think like you start off, I want to save my children. You won't use us as your slave army. Mm-hmm. We will find a way to break free of your control. But in episode 4 of season 1, what did he say to Arondir? To untangle it all would all but require the creation of a new world. But that is something only the gods can do. And I am no god. At least
yet.
Not yet. Oh, dun, dun, dun. Yeah. I'm sorry. Once you start talking about yourself as somebody on the pathway to goddom, you've fallen into bucket 2. You have. So hit me with your theory and share your thoughts on Elrond.
I noticed you mentioned Arondir and Theo, and that's fine with me. Okay, so listen.
we're gonna talk about Theo later. I feel like we maybe limit it to there.
I'm working on this theory. I don't have all the evidence yet. Obviously, we'll monitor as we go along. I'm curious why we think Durin and Elrond are the most skeptical of everyone when it comes to Sauron or the rings or any of this. Seemingly the most impervious to this temptation. And there's a part of my sentimental heart that wants to believe that it is because their connection to each other is so strong that it makes them less vulnerable to this intrusion. It's not just, and I think also that Disa Durin I'm hopeful the Disa Durin connection is part of that as well. But, there's of all the friendships, I mean, the
Yes.
stranger, Nori and Poppy are another like sort of good example of that tight, close connection between the fellowship that can create the alliance, the last alliance of elves and men. This is something like we're working towards, right? Like that alliance is what can protect you. And so I think it is important. I was curious, like Elrond being skeptical made sense to me. He's not as vulnerable as Celebrimbor, and he hasn't been as exposed as Galadriel has been to Halbrand, who is also Sauron and now Anatar, right? So, like, okay. And he doesn't have whatever
Kills me every time.
he
Every
doesn't
time
have
you say
whatever
that, it makes me laugh.
pressures Gil-galad has, right? So
Right.
that
Yeah.
made sense to me
Yeah,
as
yeah.
this sort of like objection. But why was he more skeptical than Círdan? Like what, and Círdan, like that pure longing for Valinor is there, but as you noted when we covered episodes 1 through 3, when he was like, I was wrong, perfection is here. It's not just in Valinor. We don't have to wait for Valinor.
Right.
I missed the boat to Valinor and I'm stuck here because the gods told me I had to stay here. But guess what? There's a little bit of perfection here and it's on my
Like
finger now.
the end of San Junipero, like heaven is a place on earth, just pumps right in.
Heaven is a place on my finger and it sparkles in the light and it's so nice, right? So like why is Elrond not susceptible to that? And I just think like that firm anchor of his relationship with Durin, and then Durin's skepticism, like it just like Anatar does not work on him at all. And it's not because
like,
he's
who the
like,
fuck is this guy?
yeah, it's not like he's a
who's this
completely
con man?
invulnerable person walking around. Like, he has vulnerabilities around his father, around, dwarves shoving him around in the mines or like whatever it is. But, he's constantly like, where's Elrond? What does Elrond think? Where's Elrond? Like that connection, which we loved in season 1. I kind of think it just like, and, I was trying to sort of date that into Lord of the Rings. Like, could I apply that? Where could I apply that in the Fellowship? And it's like, other friendships that we love to track are like Legolas and Gimli, who like don't really get involved in the covetous idea of the ring, and their friendship is played a bit more in the movies for laughs than it is in the books. But like, Sam and Frodo, like Sam can't carry the ring, but I just think there's something about that Sam and Frodo connection. That's what keeps Frodo hanging on when he almost goes off the edge a million different times. Literally, and,
I don't mean to.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just sort of like,
I love that.
I think that's what we're meant to be tracking here. And I don't think there's any, Galadriel certainly doesn't have an anchor elsewise, if Finrod were still alive, maybe Finrod would be, but like, Gil-galad, as far as I know, doesn't have any friends. Like, I don't know, who
Brutal. Man.
These are just things to watch for, because I think that's just something that's very important to Tolkien and that the show has latched onto. This idea of friendship as a firm anchor, or relationships in general as a firm anchor. So, yeah.
I love that. I have no notes.
Okay.
Beautiful. Fantastic.
Speaking of Isildur, as we kind of were.
As we were. Yeah.
Madeline says, season 2 Isildur, his time in battle in Mordor definitely changed him. I also think emphasizing the bond between him and his horse Beric, Mallory's favorite character, which seemed more present here than in season 1, helps solidify that he is a character we're supposed to root for. This Isildur is more reflective, more careful in his actions. He's willing to put himself in harm's way to help others, even when it proves unwise for him to do so, as evidenced when he and Estrid run into the bandits with the Mark of Adar. This version of Isildur, who I truly want to root for, who I could see becoming a good king. I think there's a version of the story where I actually sympathize with Isildur for not destroying the One Ring. Maybe. Like the elves and their 3 rings, he believes the One Ring can be used for good. While that doesn't mean I will support that decision, it adds complexity to the situation that for me has previously always been very black and white. And our listener Sarah would just like to add this important footnote. Another email. Sarah wrote, unrelated, but I love that in spite of being covered in dirt and spiderwebs, Isildur is looking noticeably hotter this season. I guess we just had to grime him up a bit to go from bratty lordling to Aragorn's ancestor, who is about to go on a hero's journey with his trusty steed. It's smart because we love a character on an arc, but also it allowed Halbrand got all the Aragorn coding in season 1, which was clever and well used, but she was saying maybe Isildur is our sort of Aragorn comp in season 2. Isildur.
Grime him up a bit. I love this. I'm excited to talk about Isildur. I just think Grime Him Up a Bit should go into the email Hall of Fame.
Bratty
Wonderful
Lordling as
stuff.
well.
Bratty Lordling also iconic. Obviously covered in dirt, grime them up a bit to make them hotter is one of the many proud Lord of the Rings on-screen traditions. That is one of the proudest, one that we hold most sacred and dear. Aragorn opening the doors while filthy and wounded. By the way, also arriving, reaching Helm's Deep thanks to a bond with the horse. Shout out Brago. While we're talking about Beric.
Vigo, our number one horse girl.
It's just incredible stuff. Incredible stuff. So in terms of the first email, I was thinking like, because I have a lot of memories of the Isildur Beric bond from season 1, but I definitely think Madeline is right that there's a notable change because
an uptick.
He walks right past the Aryan to say hi to Beric at Seaguard training. Very cute, very charming. He shares his apple with Beric on the ship to Middle Earth. We both were like, oh, we love to love a pet, and also we have some questions and feedback and lots of thoughts on apples. But he was not yet fully attuned to the nature of his bond with Beric, even though Beric was attuned to the nature of his bond with Isildur, because post-battle, pre-volcanic eruption, but post-battle, Isildur and Elendil in the 6th episode had that conversation about exactly this. Beric's very worked up, and Elendil says, it's not his pain that's bothering him, but that of his rider. I'm not in pain, Isildur says. Elendil responds, when a horse of Westerness rides into battle, he forms an unbreakable bond with the soldier he bears. In time, they become as one, even knowing the innermost feelings of each other's heart. And Isildur kind of scoffs at that, right? He's like, you know his feelings? And Elendil says, no, he knows yours. Where did you learn all this? Isildur asks. From your mother. And then there's like a beat, and Isildur says, think you could teach me. And so thinking back to that after reading this question, this felt really meaningful to me because like it's everything that Isildur has experienced in terms of battle and the trauma of battle and the loss of like a friend like Antimo and all of the people they lost. But there's also this familial aspect to this, right? It's about the relationship with his father. It's about the relationship with his mother, like the maturation that was already beginning to unfold and then ties to like a pathway to a deeper understanding of his own history and an exploration of those bonds. And I think like more broadly, Madeline really makes a great point because part of why I was so excited to just watch the show in general, we talked about this in like our season 1 preview pods and the build up to the show and trailer breakdowns and stuff like that. Like I was really eager to spend time with Isildur and like understand a character who does one of the most consequential things in the world,
absolutely.
Like in the story, right?
Yeah.
How do you become a person who does that?
Yeah. And I remember when like JD and Patrick were talking about like pre-season 1, sort of like the stories that they were excited to tell.
Yeah.
Isildur's arc was like really at the fore for them. But I think there was just so much to do in season 1. Like so many characters that they felt like they had to introduce that Isildur, in my memory, and I like Maxime Baldry a lot. We've talked about, in years and years and other things that we've seen him in. But in my memory, he gets reduced a bit to like, again, just like staring out of the horizon, logging, all of that sort of stuff for the wider world out there. And as I mentioned on a previous pod, I am immediately so much more invested in him in season 2. And sometimes it's like that idea of like the making of someone is thrusting them out into the world this way, like we were used to seeing Isildur in the shadow of his father, who was this like, strong, stalwart leader of men figure that everyone like looks up to in Numenor, and Isildur is his like kind of fail son, sort of thing. Right. And so who can you be when you start? We talked about this a lot with like Loki and Thor, right? Like who can you be when you are no longer attached to the person that like you're measured up to your whole life, and what can blossom within you? And I think that is the opportunity that Elendil ditching Isildur in Middle Earth because he thought he was dead, and going back to Numenor with his hot queen girlfriend is, that's the opportunity that they're affording Isildur here as a character.
Yeah. They both potentially have hot girlfriends, and so that's great for them. I think where I am with this right now is, I agree. I was like riveted by Isildur in season 2 in a way that felt new. I don't mind where we found him and met him in season 1, because that makes that we love a character on an arc, and that makes the maturation that we're watching more rewarding. And I think we have to actually understand the root of that restlessness that drove him initially, like that searching for purpose and searching for belonging, and also the guilt. Like, we now understand, thanks to what we've heard in season 2, the way that the guilt over his mother's death and her sacrifice had been consuming him. So then that's something else we can bring an extra lens of understanding to the way he finds himself at odds with his father, this like veil between them, in addition to everything that you're citing. And like, we think to something like, he's hearing these like whispers on the water, or thinking about his brother, like the conversation that Isildur and Elendil had in the 3rd episode last season about Anarian, and like that wedge between them. Like, this family has a lot of stuff they need to work through together in therapy. Yeah. And there's like this question of like the pull and the call, the guilt and the shame. So he's so unsure of like his footing and what his role in all of that is in season 1, that he like deliberately sabotages his Sea Guard training, thereby fucking up potentially their futures of his 2 best friends, Valandil and Antimo. Antimo, R.I.P. We miss you still. But like,
we
he's
think about you
desperate.
All the time, Antimo. You're for my mind all the time.
He had like at the pre-war happy hour, just like a beautiful fiance, and he had a whole life ahead of him. And then they moved a log and found him dead beneath. It was tragic. But like, Isildur's just like basically so desperate for a sense of worth, that he has to like, beg and maneuver and work his way into the mission in the first place. But that, and like, I love when Galadriel says to him on the ship, I love that you mentioned Thor, because this is like the same lesson Thor had to learn, right? Despise not the labor which humbles the heart. Humility has saved entire kingdoms. The proud have all but led to ruin. And so like, that's one of the lessons Isildur had to learn. He had to find his humility, and that's what we're watching.
The humility, but also just like that, that like eager to please or eager to prove himself or all that sort of stuff. He doesn't have that energy around Theo or Estrid or Arondir. There's like, I got to get my horse is for in his mind. But like, I really loved the conversation between Theo and Isildur when they're just like standing next to the aqueduct. You know what I mean? And it's just like, I don't know. There was something really compelling about that connection. So yeah.
And he was speaking then of Numenor with a pride absent. Yeah. That need to like, carve out his particular place in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was lovely.
You'll love to see it. All right. Isildur. So like, again, one thing we know about Isildur, yada, 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 everything else. One thing we know about Isildur is that he decided to not throw a ring into Mount Doom, and we get to figure out why. So we did have I don't think it's in any of our questions today, I think, but like we did have one listener like say like, imagine it's going to be exciting to see like to see this Elrond and this Isildur do that iconic moment,
Oh my God. Yeah. I can't wait. I mean, it will be fucking devastating. Devastating, but I can't wait.
Elizabeth writes in about some rings. And this is where we might get into like a scotch spoilery, but we'll see how we navigate it, right? But Elizabeth says, when will the show explain more about the titular power of these rings? I first raised an eyebrow when Círdan the shipwright claimed Narya the Red Ring. And I was like, wait, isn't that the ring associated with fire? And after some internet sleuthing, I understand the ability of it to help the bearer withstand the bullshit of time and inspire good, to be fitting for one of the oldest and most respected elves in Middle-earth, and for its eventual bearer, Gandalf, gotta be #1 hype man for all those depressed hobbits and kings out there who need a pep talk. Same for Galadriel, especially, and Nenya's properties of warding against evil, aka hot Sauron who fucks. Do you think this is the Middle-earth version of a chastity belt? She's definitely going to need its protection and steadfastness when she holds up in Lothlorien to hide from her evil ex. The question bothering me is, will the show ever elaborate on these themes concretely, meaning what the rings actually do for their bearers, or leave it up to the audience to research/interpret for themselves? As a hard magic nerd girly, I understand Tolkien prefers soft magic in his world. But at least some basic parameters for the audience would be nice. Even a simple scene or two with the bearers talking about its effects would be nice. And Galadriel and Gil chatting about visions was a step in the right direction. Yet with the show circling, around the quest for rings and or power, I can't help but feel it's a massive plot hole to not explain how exactly these rings are supposed to help the various problems they're sought as solutions for. And with only 5 more episodes, will they make time to do so? I can't be the only one left wondering. All right. So thank you, Elizabeth.
Ring stuff, go.
Ring stuff, go. So we got some lore to talk about here. Again, this is like middle ground spoilerish stuff. So you can, this is presumably what this television series will be covering. So you can skip ahead if you want to. So here's a question that I'm going to start with in my response, which is Elrond right? Does Sauron control the rings? Again, this is something that the show is like question mark. You can skip ahead if you don't want to know. The 3 rings are unsullied, right? Mm-hmm. In that they were not made by Sauron. He didn't whisper his little chants over it, over the mithril as it went into the alloy. So, but according to this letter from J.R. Tolkien, though unsullied because they were not made by Sauron nor touched by him, they were nonetheless partly products of his instruction and ultimately under the control of the One. So, bottom line, Sauron's access is much less potent than the other rings. So, like, when the Dwarf Lords put those 7 rings on, Sauron has direct influence over them. That is not necessarily the case yet with the 3, but once he makes the 1 ring to rule them all, the 3 are within that all.
Right.
That is to be ruled by the 1. Right.
There's that line from Gandalf in Fellowship when he's running through all of the particulars with Frodo, and he says the 3 are still hidden, but that no longer troubles him. He only needs the 1, for he made that ring himself. It is his, and he let a great part of his own former power pass into it so that he could rule all the others. If he recovers it, then he will command them all again, wherever they be, even the 3.
So the 3
There's some risk.
So the fact that the elves are using the 3 right now, is not great but not terrible.
Right.
And the fact that they use them later, and we'll talk about that in a second, is not terrible because the 1 ring was thought lost, that out of Sauron's reach. Right. So then they felt safe to use the 3 again. So the main power of all the rings, this is according to a letter from J.R. Tolkien. Quote, the chief power of all the rings alike was the prevention or slowing of decay, i.e. change views as a regrettable thing. The preservation of what is desired or loved or its semblance. This is more or less an elvish motive. But also they enhance the natural powers of a possessor, thus approaching, quote, magic, a motive easily corruptible into evil, a lust for domination. And finally, they had other powers more directly derived from Sauron, the necromancer, so he is called as he casts a fleeting shadow and presage on the pages of The Hobbit, such as rendering invisible the material body and making things of the invisible world visible. That's the seen versus unseen world stuff. So, enhancing the natural powers of the bearer, preservation. This is something, this goes back to that question of longing. This goes back to like Tolkien's longing for pastoral England, like how much he hated the industrialization of England and how much he longed for the verdant valleys and copses of trees of his youth and stuff like that. And how there was something slightly ever so tinged with MAGA-iness about that in Tolkien, where it's just sort of like his stubborn anti-all innovation, but like, but in terms of like the foul pollution of industrialization and stuff like that. And he's just like, let's preserve the beautiful trees. Well, no one think of the trees. That is the power of these rings, allegedly, to preserve and protect Rivendell, to preserve and protect Lorien, etc. Anything you want to say about that before I get into the specific rings?
Hit me. Take me through them.
Nenya. Water ring. The elements it's not like bending. It's not, the elements are not that closely tied to the rings. They do have different elements associated with them. It's not that big of a deal. Galadriel's ring preserves and protects and hides things, which she uses to protect Lothlorien and makes it stronger. Keep out those intrusive Sauron thoughts. This is the quote that our pal Brian Cogman identified as the sort of trigger for the entire Rings of Power show from the Mirror of Galadriel chapter in Fellowship of the Ring. She says of Sauron, he gropes ever to see me and my thoughts, but the door is still closed. And I think the ring helps her with that as long as he doesn't have his little matching ring. As long as they're not wedding rings, then it's fine. If she's just wearing the ring herself, Nenya helps her. If you
Otherwise, it's just nonstop visions of them sitting on that branch.
It's just like Halbrand. I mean Sauron. Sorry. So sorry. Sorry. In terms of water, if you want to find it there, the Mirror of Galadriel and the Vial of Galadriel both use water from the same enchanted fountain. They're enchanted rivers on the borders of Lorien, protecting them from invasion. Then again, Eregion also has rivers protecting it. So, what could possibly go wrong there? But
as Gil is happy to point out, it's like
2 rivers
thick walls
and a curtain wall.
rivers.
Don't worry about it.
It'll be fine.
We got a whole email about curtain walls. We're going to talk about that in episode 4. Narya, the fire ring, originally held by Círdan, but given to Gandalf, inspires others and gives resistance against the weariness of time. Perfect for an Istari trying to rally free people against Sauron. There is some implication that Gandalf uses it to free Theoden from Wormtongue's influence. It's definitely supercharging his own powers and his staff, etc. when he does that. This is what, under the fire category, this is a quote from Círdan. Take this ring, master, for your labors will be heavy, but it will support you in the weariness that you have taken upon yourself. For this is the ring of fire, and with it you may rekindle hearts in a world that grows chill. But as for me, my heart is with the sea, and I will dwell by the gray shores until the last ship sails. I will await you. So that is.
I love this guy.
I know. This is Círdan's quote. It's a quote from the appendices, which is like sort of some of the main text that the show is working off of. So I wouldn't be surprised if we hear, if someone on the show is Gandalf and gets this ring at some point, I would not be surprised if we hear Círdan say that. And then this is a quote from Return of the King about this idea of like this ring perhaps helping with like uplifting and easing weariness. Quote, so it was that Gandalf took command of the last defense of the city of Gondor. Wherever he came, men's hearts would lift again and the winged shadows passed from memory. And yet, when he had gone, the shadows closed on men again and their hearts went cold and the valor of Gondor withered into ash. So, wear that ring. Inspire some people. Love to see it. Last but not least, Vilya, the air ring. Yeah. This is one that Gil-galad is currently wearing, but Elrond will wear in the future. So eventually he will get over his anti-ring stance.
Yep.
Never had his power specified, but since Elrond is a healer, might be related to that. It's probably in some way influenced Rivendell's existence, preserving or protecting or healing it in some unspecified way. Does Elrond use it to fuck up the Nazgul in the river in order to save Frodo? Because that's a Glorfindel Elrond thing, not an Arwen thing. And then here's a quote about all 3 of the rings, but we get a mention of Elrond's ring. Yet after the fall of Sauron, their power was ever at work, and where they abode, their mirth also dwelt, and all things were unstained by the griefs of time. The ring of sapphire was with Elrond in the fair valley of Rivendell, upon whose house the stars of heaven most brightly shone. So that's ring stuff. Anything you want to say about this ring stuff?
I think you covered all of the particulars. I think maybe just like broadly, I will say like when we think about again the nature of adaptation and what like making a television show allows you to do, this is the kind of thing you have more room for in a show than you would in a film, and really should explore.
It's my hope that we will see Galadriel, Gil-galad, and Círdan discover more specifics of their rings.
So.
Like,
yeah, and
like show us, don't tell us, right? Like
exactly,
is what we
and like
see.
that actually feels. To be clear, I don't think either of us needs or crucially wants or hopes to see at all anything like, we're not asking for midichlorians. That's not what we want. We don't want anything like that. But and exploration and examination of the particulars of the magic, whether it comes to the nature of the forging or then the powers at play, like for understanding the connection between wearer and ring, between all of the rings, the different character sets, a Sauron, the one ring, the ruling ring, and the other rings, etc. Like, this is important. I think like where we are right now, the anxiety and the question about only 5 left, I get it, but also like that's just this season. I do think we need to we'll see a little bit more this season, but then we have more seasons to go. And like,
right.
I think literally hearing Círdan say we do not yet fully understand these rings is like a hopeful kind of note, because it shows us that the characters are, and then that, like, again cited in the question, that conversation between Galadriel and Gil-galad about the visions that they're having and the kind of thinning of the barrier between the worlds, another thing we always love to talk about. It's on their minds. And so it makes sense to me, actually, that we would be discovering these particulars more methodically as the characters are beginning to understand them too. And it feels like there's plenty of time for that. Yet, I don't think we need to necessarily fast forward to anticipating a moment where we didn't explore that in full. I think if we don't, it will be a huge bummer and ultimately a mistake for the show. But I think there's plenty of time. And I think more broadly with the magic of the world, there's time to explore that. Like, what are we going to learn about the magic of the Istar when we watch The Stranger?
Hopefully get his stuff under control.
His powers and his ability to control them. Like, it feels like there's a lot of actually like ripe storytelling opportunity there with the rings, but more broadly with the magic in this fantasy world. So I'm excited for that.
Love it. Okay, Brian writes in to say, throwing back to season 1, as far as Galadriel and Hot Sauron, aka Halbrand, aka Anatar, aka Symbiote, are concerned. Wow. Would we define their meeting as a meet cute? Would we define Prince Durin and Elrond, because two guys swinging hammers feels outright homoerotic? Was there a meet cute in season 2 you liked or are looking forward to?
You go first. Take me through your meet cute thoughts.
I mean, yes. I mean, I think the raft is a classic meet cute scenario. I mean, it's a little more sea beastie than cute, but it's still
nothing says romance and cute romance like imminent peril from a creature in the Sundering Sea. Yeah, we felt
Durin
it right
and
away.
Elrond less so, just because they had already met. What to put it in the rom-com terms, because that's what meet cute comes from. This would be a classic screwball comedy plot of remarriage, which is like you see in the Philadelphia Story, or you see, like, to go back to our guy Shakespeare, Much Ado About Nothing, people who were previously associated, not some time has passed, there are resentments, but then they find their way back to each other, the comedy plot of remarriage. So, like, that's sort of where I would put Elrond and Durin in season 1. In terms of season 2, I don't know if we're going to get it this season. I'm just really excited for Elrond to meet more people, because he was, like, leaned in and then down in the mines for the rest of season 1. And, he's over in Eregion, so is Celebrimbor, briefly Halbrand, they didn't interact very much. Galadriel, Gil-galad, but like, a Isildur and Elrond, I want to see it. Or like, you identified Elrond as your favorite character. I might agree with you. And like, I want to see him in all corners of the world. So that's
especially when those locks are flowing, and like we've got so many flowing locks in the trailers.
Chief on my there's something going on with the elf wigs this season, which we will continue to explore. Also, we got actually several emails about elf ears, and I promise you we'll be talking about
remarkable hashtags.
We will be talking about the
terms
what is it, meaty thick boys, I think. We will be talking about the elf ears in episode 4 for sure. But
oh man,
Elrond, get him out there in the world, or as you said, any scene is better with Durin and Disa in it. So take Durin and Disa anywhere, and we're gonna have a great time. I don't think there isn't like meet cutes with Isildur, but Estrid obviously, but like of course.
I think we can count Isildur and Estrid as a meet cute. I mean, she's got her hands on his inner thigh in a mere moment.
High up the thigh.
It's interesting now because, like, to think back, so much of the obviously Galadriel and Halbrand is Galadriel here, top of the list, but so much of the like romance-centric focus of season 1 was Arondir and Bronwyn. So like we have some space to fill now. What we do. Here's my question for you. Would you count Murdania and Ahlman?
Yes.
She's like, can we just bring him a shawl?
Yes. My girl Murdania.
It's raining. Got it bad.
I'm worried.
Got it bad.
I'm worried.
Who can blame her? Not us. Not us. This is not a spoiler warning because I have genuinely no idea what's actually going to happen with this in the story, but it's a trailer warning because sometimes people don't like to hear about. So I'm going to mention something. Not actually. I can't remember. I don't think this was in the season the 3 trailers before the season, but it was at the end of episode 1, this season on. So if you didn't watch that, you skip that, you don't like to see that stuff, hit the fast forward button twice. Poppy gonna meet someone?
Yeah.
Poppy's leaning in for a kiss.
Oh, that's a kiss shot. 100%.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes.
So that's exciting.
Yes.
We've got a meet cute pending, and I'm excited to see what that is for Poppy. That's very exciting. And then just on the romance front, as stated on many prior pods, and as I will continue to state until they consummate their love at last, I need Elendil and Muriel to fuck. I need it, Joe.
Do you need it on screen? Because this is the question of
I would like a little. I'm sorry to be so painfully on brand. I'm fine with a chaster Rings experience, but I would like just a touch more sex in Rings of Power. I think we've ratcheted up the violence. Why not ratchet up the sex?
A heavy snog, something like that at least.
Yeah. At least.
Not just fingertips grazing and yearning. Okay, got it.
I mean, I would take some grazing, yearning fingertips, certainly.
Here's my most pressing meet cute. I need Kemen's face and a fist, an axe, a sword,
an axe.
something.
Just an axe splitting his
Durin's
face open.
Axe
That's
and Kemen's face. That's
friend, I need your axe.
really high on my list.
Okay, man, great stuff. I love it.
This question comes from Andy, who says, did you see when the stranger reached out for the staff Mirage that it turned into a different staff that looked like Gandalf the Grey's? It actually looks a little bit more like Radagast, but has that woods vibe. Definitely didn't get that from the one evil wizard, leading me to think they're not both blue. So, staff questions, Mallory. Yeah. We already know how you feel about whether or not this can and should be Gandalf.
Yeah, it has to be. It has to be. I actually had some fascinating, just in the wild conversations with some pals and people this weekend, and I this perhaps is confirmation bias where I'm looking for people who agree with the thing I already think. Entirely possible. It's never happened to me before, but this was coming up. If it's not Gandalf, why are they fucking with us? Basically, so I'll be curious to see on the Radagast front. We talked about this in the deep dive. The Stranger's Cloak is certainly looking browner this season. I assume that's just desert dust and dirt on the road to Rune, but maybe it is deliberately there to fuel our speculation. I would say I'm not getting Radagast vibes from the Stranger.
Is it the lack of bird shit on his head?
Lack of bird shit streaming down his face and coating his cheekbones.
Yeah.
Limited communing with animals so far. When he has, it's gone quite poorly. Some injured wolves and some some firefly genocide, basically. And there's that line from Gandalf in Fellowship. You are near the borders of the Shire now. And what do you want with me? It must be pressing. You were never a traveler unless driven by great need. Now, I guess you could say certainly this is great need, but I think if you said what do we associate the Stranger with? We'd say traveling and the quest. These are just it's not pinging Radagast to me, but on the staff vision front, I'll say we should just keep in mind, because I do think there's definitely some visual similarities to Radagast, but more so I think to Gandalf's staff in the Moria area of Fellowship, and Gandalf's staffs change over the course of the films. It's much more of
white staff. Yeah.
Well, but even before that, in The Hobbit, his staff has a closed kind of tightly knit, more closed, like upper netting and webbing, and like in Fellowship it's more of like an open kind of nestling, like nest and cocoon. So
remembering that the game that they're constantly playing legally is that they want to like invoke the Peter Jackson films but can't like legally copy the Peter Jackson films, right? I actually think the thing, you and I were going back and forth of like, is this Gandalf? And that is definitely the question that, like, we're not done with mystery boxes. Like, they're definitely like, who's Sauron? We solved for X. We know who Sauron is. It's Halbrand, who's now Anatar, right? Like, we get that. Is this guy Gandalf is going to be maybe a question they're going to make us ask for 2 more seasons. Who knows?
Oh, man.
Nothing has convinced me more that this is Gandalf since we spoke last week than that quote I read about Círdan handing the ring off to Gandalf. And this, now I am like sort of enraptured this idea of we will see all of the people who wear the 3 rings of power in Lord of the Rings get their rings before this show is over. Do you know?
Yeah.
We'll see the rings on their final hands before this is all over. And in that case, we need a Gandalf. So
need him. All
right.
Let's follow our nose to that outcome.
Yeah, because someone wrote us an email being like, of course it's Gandalf. They use his quote. I'm like, yes, we know that they are like heavily implying that it's Gandalf. We are picking up all the clues. I just don't know if it's like a red herring or not, So
if a bird takes a shit on the stranger's head, are you gonna switch your stance?
I was told there was be no math on this podcast. Okay, so Jen wrote in to ask, she says, in the deep dive of the first 3 episodes, you talked about evil being cold, freezing the land as Sauron, quote unquote, dies. I wonder if Tolkien was influenced by Dante in this instance, or the showrunner's writers if the coldness isn't specified in the books. In his Commedia, Dante crafts the 9th circle of the Inferno as cold, not hot. Commedia is how you pronounce it. I'm so sorry. Satan is frozen in a lake of ice at the center of the earth. Just wondering if you 2 knew anything as to if or how much exposure Tolkien had to Dante. And boy, Jen, do I have a fun answer for you.
This is incredible.
We read some like fun, salty quotes from Tolkien in season 1 of Rings of Power. There are many that exist. This man was a frequent corresponder. He had a lot of opinions. He was not afraid to use them.
You know who would have been a great podcaster?
Oh, Tolkien. Oh my God. Lewis and Tolkien on the mic, the Inklings podcast. Shit. Lewis is Tolkien's BFF C.S. Lewis is about to come up. Okay, so via some like Dante site that I
live
found.
Show at the Eagle and Child.
Tolkien's ambivalence towards Dante would be best presented in his own words. In 1967, Tolkien gave an interview to the Daily Telegraph. Having received the draft of the pre-published interview, he sent back his corrections. And so we have both his original words and his retraction of them in print, which are worth quoting in full. So originally when asked about Dante, Tolkien said, quote, "Doesn't attract me. He is full of spite and malice. I don't care for his petty relations with petty people in petty cities." That's what Tolkien said about Dante. Once he saw those words in front of his face, this is the retraction that he sent. Quote, "My reference to Dante was outrageous. I do not seriously dream of being measured against Dante, a supreme poet. Man. At one time, C.S. Lewis and I used to read him to one another. I was for a while a member of the Oxford Dante Society. I think at the proposal of Lewis, who overestimated greatly my scholarship in Dante, or Italian generally, it remains true that I found the pettiness that I spoke of a sad blemish in places." So, Mallory, how do you feel about the Tolkien burn and then the hasty retraction from,
we know now that he would not only be a great podcaster, but great at Twitter.
Yes.
The Twitter apology.
Yes.
Notes app.
In the Notes app.
Tolkien broke out the 100%. Notes app.
But I also just love the added info we get that like C.S. Lewis like press ganged him into the Dante Society. And he's like, I don't really care about Dante or Italian at all.
One of my best friends to this day, like one of the bridesmaids at my wedding, was somebody who I happened to be placed with in like an orientation group, first day of college, 4 people, journalism students. Okay, you guys meet. And then like we had a thing. There was another orientation event after. And this dear friend, 20 years later, she was like, I have to go to a placement exam for my French class. And I didn't want to sit alone this next thing. And so I was like, you strike me as someone who, would be great at foreign languages. I think because she wanted to actually place down. She had placed into a higher French class than she wanted to take. And I basically was like, come sit with me at this other orientation thing. Don't go to your French placement test.
Yeah.
And I think she does have some regrets about listening to me in that moment, but I don't think she has regrets about our 2 decades long beautiful bond.
When you started this story, I was like, no way did someone make Mallory do something she didn't want to do. And then when I realized you were...
Other way around. Come on.
You were the influencer, I was like, yes, that sounds right. Okay.
Oh, boy.
Last but certainly
Speaking
not
of
least.
people susceptible to influence.
Last but certainly not least. We did cover this a bit in our answering of the sort of like longing question, but this is where we're going to get, I guess, as much as we did with the rings answer, into some spoilerish territory.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is a speculation question that we asked a lot in our coverage of season 1, and we kept it out of like sort of the main like non-spoiler section. So I'm just going to give that warning here. This is we got an email from Jason that I'm going to say TLDR Ring Wraith watch go. There will be 9 ring wraiths, 9 Nazgul, 9 men who are turned into foul beasties. Whomst among the cast that we have already met could be one of those 9? So that's the question that we're going to consider right now. Shout out John Richter, who does our is out this week, but does our video production usually. Sent us an email this morning, so it's too late for me to like put in the notes here, but he is also very much like Ring Wraith watch go. He has some Farazan intel that I am not privy to, so we will get more info from John on that before I go into that. I'm not going into that.
I just want to say, John sending a proper email instead of just texting or slacking is so incredible to me.
He promised he was going to do that, and then he did it. He sent a bullet pointed email full of theories. So John Richter. Okay. All right. So speaking of kings,
man,
here we go. Ring,
Wild.
Wraith, watch, go. 9 rings for men doomed to die is how the Ringverse goes. And here's a quote from the Silmarillion. Ever heard of it? Quote, those who used the 9 rings became mighty in their day, kings, sorcerers, and warriors of old. They obtained glory and great wealth, yet it turned to their downfall. They had, as it seemed, unending life, yet life became unendurable to them. They could walk, if they would, unseen by all eyes in this world beneath the sun, and they could see things in worlds invisible to mortal men, but too often they beheld only the phantoms and delusions of Sauron. And one by one, sooner or later, according to their native strength and to the good or evil of their wills in the beginning, they fell under the thraldom of the ring that they bore and of the domination of the one which was Sauron's. And they became forever invisible, save to him that wore the ruling ring. And they entered into the realm of shadows. The Nazgul were they, the Ringwraiths, the Ula. No, I'm not going to pronounce that. The enemy's most terrible servants. Darkness went with them, and they cried with the voices of death. Okay.
Dude, is it too late? We're a few years in, but should we change the name of the pod to Under the Thraldom? Yeah. I mean, how did that escape us when we were first considering what to call? You know how in the index, any index, but including the rings indices, you go to a term and then it's like in parentheses all the other terms that you might reference. Nazgul, parentheses, ring wraiths, black riders, fell riders, black men, the 9 riders, 9 lords, messengers of Mordor, winged messengers, shriekers, etc. They had to end that with a fucking etc.
But they didn't put that
incredible
word that I dare not pronounce.
And that's why you're off the hook.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think the key takeaway from that, as we sort of ponder who in the cast might be a candidate for the 9, is this one by one, sooner or later, according to their native strength, into the good or evil of their wills in the beginning. So not all of these men are going to be Kemens, craven, evil, shitty people. You know what I mean? Like, I think we should be on the lookout for some people who feel a bit more noble, but could go anyway. Here's what we know. We know so little about the Nine. This is like a piece of lore that Tolkien really has not fleshed out or filled in, which again gives the show opportunity to play.
Too busy talking shit to Dante.
Their leader, known as the Witch King of Angmar, the Lord of the Nazgul, or the Black Captain, had once been the King of Angmar in the north of Eriador. So, and then, okay, here's the thing about Tolkien. He's forever writing letters and unfinished tales and all this sort of stuff like that. And he just like said, I don't know, 5 different things about the Witch King of Angmar. So there's like a lot going on. So we definitely have not met someone who was the King of Angmar in the north of Eriador. That has not happened to us. Okay.
Right.
But also elsewhere.
Yeah.
There are 3 lords of the once powerful island realm of Numenor. In his notes for translators, Tolkien speculated that the Witch King of Angmar, ruler of the Northern Kingdom with his capital at Carndum, was of Numenorian origin, right? So a thing to remember about the Rings of Power, something that JD and Patrick have been very, very open about and is already evident, they are massively condensing the timeline, right? So like, if Tolkien has in his mind someone from Numenor who gets a ring and in doing so becomes, they become kings, they become sorcerers, they become all these things. They live for years and years and years and years before they become the ring wraiths.
Right.
We're not going to have time for that in the timeline of what we're seeing because the Isildur is already like a man grown, right? So the Numenorian ? Who becomes the King of Angmar. I don't know that is going to happen, but could it be that the Witch King of Angmar is just a Numenorian in the show? So here are our candidates then. I believe Pharazôn, Miriel, Elendil, and Isildur are out. Certainly Elendil and Isildur are out.
For sure. Yeah.
John has some questions about Pharazôn. I thought it was very important that Pharazôn shuffle off this mortal coil the way he does in the books, but sure.
Yeah.
Then we've got that piece of shit Kevin. The
Strong
heroic
contender.
Valandil.
No.
My new fave Belzegar. And Aarion, who's to say one of the ring wraiths isn't a lady? We don't know that.
Could be.
It says 3 rings for Elven Kings, but one of those Elven Kings is Galadriel. So just something to keep in mind, gender-wise.
Yeah.
Okay? So.
Okay, if I'm Rishi from Pierpoint, I have already put my entire life savings down on Kevin.
Yes. Correct.
Right?
Correct. It feels like it's why he's there. I mean, Belzegar and Kemen and Aarion are there to give Pharazôn someone to talk and scheme with. Like, that's sort of part of their purpose there. And Aarion to make life more complicated for Elendil because someone in his own family is, like, on the other side. So, like, make it more poignant. But yeah, Kemen, of all the Numenorians, Kemen, number one. Number one.
Yeah. I do like Aarion as a candidate as well. Like, aligning with the power grabbers. The exposure to the Palantir also like makes her a very intriguing candidate for whatever like a path awaits. I'm even just the way she was like, even though it ends up being like, leverage to take Muriel down, I found something secret, something dangerous, something forbidden, like what we've glimpsed of how she relates to anything that's like to be coveted or feared by some party. Fascinating to me.
She also loves jewelry. She's rocking a lot of dramatic earrings this season. So,
Loves a notable neckline and an earring. Belzegar strikes me as just like a bit player sycophant, but you never know.
Well, we're going to need 9. So he could be like one of the 9, but like really 9th on the roster. Do you know what I mean?
Do you like the idea of Kemen and Aarion? They're a couple.
They're like a shitty power couple. Yes.
Yeah.
And you said absolutely not about Valandil. You're like, absolutely not. My guy would never.
I will be, I think, just crestfallen. Okay. I can't see it. But yeah, I am compelled by your note to keep in mind that we shouldn't only be considering candidates who have already shown us some
shittiness,
greedy, evil tendency.
So for right now, if I had to bet, I would pick Kemen, Belzegar, and Arian as like our 3. Because I really do think that Pharazôn needs a different ending than becoming a ring wraith. Okay.
Yeah.
Quote, so 3 lords of the once powerful island realm of Numenor. Next category, quote, according to the lore, kings of countries in Middle Earth. Again, Isildur is out.
Right.
Tall, moody Theo.
Still a leading candidate, I think.
Estrid. Her betrothed. We're just banging around Pelargir right now. This is like all we don't have a lot of locations for men, so we're doing our best. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna, again, we said more broadly for this question, like talking and looking ahead, so you had your spoiler warning. I'm gonna put Estrid in like Isildur's unnamed wife.
I like it.
The territory. Yeah.
Because as we've mentioned many times, Tolkien does not prefer to name
like, a woman
the wives of mothers.
And there was a woman.
Yes. I'm with you. I agree. But maybe her betrothed, who surely we will meet at some point this season.
Could be. And he's like, wow.
Yeah. You ditched me for Isildur.
Yeah.
That guy.
He's like, I get it. But now I need to go do something drastic.
Yeah.
How are you coping with the fact that it's not going to be Waldrick?
What a devastating blow for all of us here at House of R.
Why? How?
I know. We were rooting for you, my guy, to live in long in the legacy. Tall, moody Theo.
Yeah.
Again, to go back to that, like maybe not as heroic as Valandil, but like not someone that I think of as like evil, but someone who is vulnerable. And,
and someone we have already seen like fall under the sway of something. Like, he did. He uses it as kind of like a part of the ploy at the fireside here to kind of help Isildur. But when he shows the arm wound and he's like reminding us,
I did more.
I'm
for
one of you.
Adar.
I serve. It's proof I've done more for him than any of you can claim. Like. And again, that conversation between Theo and Galadriel in the penultimate episode last season, the guilt that he's carrying, like. And even then, the way that built toward, she's encouraging him to like trust in the design, right? And surrender. And he says, my home is gone. Where's the design in that? And now in addition, he's like resenting the death of his mother. And he is
You're not
very,
my dad.
very, very vulnerable. Speaking of, I think we've both kind of moved into like, maybe we won't find out who Chekhov's Theo's missing dad is, but like also his missing dad could still be a candidate too.
You got to mention.
Right? Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
In Unfinished Tales, the Witch King's second in command is named Kamul, the Black Easterling, or the Shadow of the East. Guess what? We've gone east with the Stranger and Nori and Poppy, and we've met the Gaudrim, which are just basically dusty Nazgul. So we've got 2 named character in the Gaudrim. They have the copper masks. We've got Kilta, who's got sort of like the long mask, and Brank, who's got the skull mask. Are these proto Nazgul? What do you think?
I think somebody from the Rune plotline has to end up being one of the 9. The Easterlings are of Rune. This feels inevitable.
But we gotta say, okay, so we picked 3 Numenorians that we feel moderately comfortable with. We've got Theo feels pretty good. In the Southland sort of area. And then let's say we take both the named Gaudrim. That is still only 6. Did I do my math correctly? Yes. We're 3 short. So listen, we're only in season 2. Sauron has already said, I need rings for men. Yeah. Can you make me rings for men? So that's already on his mind, but who knows how long
and
it's going to take.
And then there's like a very intense trailer line where he's like, you will give me the 9. Feels like it's going to be a focus.
Yeah.
These masked trackers, we also know already about them that they have made a pact, right? They've like made a pact with our mysterious Kieran Hines, dark wizard figure,
skin condition
in exchange for like clearing up their
eczema
blemishes or whatever.
Yeah.
So
someone's like, hey, I can fix your eczema. Put this ring on, and you won't need the creams anymore.
Let me tell you what it did for this leaf.
All right, so that's Ring Wraith Watch. Go.
Great stuff.
We will be doing this.
Great stuff.
Rest assured, every week. This is a fun.
How many minutes, as we plan ahead? How many minutes do you want to carve out for Wig Watch and Ear Watch at the end of the week? are you thinking?
Great question. The ear stuff
Just
is
like
sort
a
of
mini bonus
astonishing.
pod?
And also, the elf sideburn watch. I think the
Yeah.
elf hair watch is actually related to ear watch. I have some questions about what's
Mm,
happening with the
mhm.
prosthetics ears this season. We'll talk about it.
Can't wait.
10 minutes max, but that's a chunky little wig watch session. So we'll see.
Meaty thick boy.
Meaty thick boy. All right. Anything else want to say?
We did it.
We did
Can't
it.
wait to be back with you in mere days to discuss the next episode of Rings of Power Season 2.
All right. Thank you to Mallory, Rubin. Thank you to all of the bad babies for your emails, hobbitsanddragons@gmail.com. Thanks to Steve Ahlman in Chicago and nonetheless manning the soundboard for us today. Thank you so much, Steve. Thanks to Arjuna Ringerverse for his production work on this and every episode. Thanks to Jomi Adeniran on the social, and filling in for John Richter this week, we have Stefano Sanchez. Thank you so much. We will see you at the end of the week for episode 4, Rings of Power. Bye.